Welcome back to Mike Ferry TV. Mike Ferry speaking to you today. It's the week of February 25th. We started a discussion last week on getting listings sold using the concept of price reductions when necessary, and they're necessary often, to get the property sold. We have to understand, and I think you do, that when you're asking for a price reduction, you're creating a little bit of a hostile environment for yourself and very much for the seller. The sellers aren't going to be real excited. They're not sitting around saying, honey, I hope the agent calls us regarding a price reduction this week. Let's have that discussion. Boy, won't that be fun. The very phone call, when you bring up the fact that you want to come by and talk to them about price, creates a little bit of resentment, a little stress, okay, a little fear. What's going to happen next? Is it ever going to sell? These are all normal. So we're going to look at some other price reduction strategies. I've written down 6 more. I covered 4 last week. We have 6 more. We'll cover 6 or 7 more per week for the next couple of weeks to help you get into this mindset. I guess what I'm saying to you is if you're not watching Mike Ferry TV every day for the next 7 days, there's a good chance a lot of what I'm saying can go over your head, okay? It's normal, it's common. You have distractions. You have things going on. You're sitting and watching this at your desk, on your computer, on your iPhone, etc. You're driving your car, trying to watch it at the same time. Please don't do that. You got to focus on this whole concept we're talking about today. So one of the things that I feel strongly about, which majority of people do not agree with me on this at all, but I talk about it a lot, and I have a lot of agents that do this all the time. Yes, we take listings overpriced. We know it, okay? Look at the number of expirations in the market today in February, 3rd week of February, versus a year ago. Okay, now just look at the number of expirations. A year ago, you know, all these great providers of service like RedX, they were getting complaints. Where are the expired listings? Well, there weren't a lot. Well, today, that has changed. They're expiring because of the price, first, because of the condition, second, and third, because of the inadequate marketing of the agent in terms of getting the property sold. So when you look at that situation, a big portion of the blame for expired listings would be ourselves. So I want you to think about this crazy wild thought. We put a sign up in a yard. We put our name across the top, okay? You know, call for Mike and call for Mary and call for Bob. That sign in the front yard is a wonderful method of quote-unquote branding, creating exposure. Obviously could get you a lot of potential sign calls. It's a huge recognition factor in a neighborhood because what we always have to understand, everybody that drives to their home through the street where you have the listing see your sign, and they have conversations. Mary, I wonder why it hasn't sold. Mary, I wonder what it's listed for. Mary, I wonder who the agent is. These are all normal conversations. You see a listing, you have questions like this in your mind. So here's my crazy wild thought for the day. If you have a listing and the seller will not reduce the price in that first 30 days, take the sign down. And I'm dead serious. Now, probably your broker is going to yell at you and yell at me and send me a nasty letter. I get them all the time. I'm used to them, okay? Why would you take the sign down? Because it's negative advertising on your listings. Why do you want to have your listing, big sign in the front yard, ask for Mike, and it sits there for 30, 60 days with no sold sign? And people are driving up and down the street saying, boy, that agent must be a pathetic agent. That thing's been for sale forever, hasn't it? And it could be only 30 or 60 days. So if you're really into branding yourself, which is one of those hot topics that we deal with every day today, brand yourself in a positive manner by not having a negative situation taking place because you have a sign in a front yard on a property that is never going to sell because of the price. All right, so let's go to some more thoughts that I want you to think about on getting your listing sold. When you're pre-qualifying a seller, you're looking for their motivation to sell and the financial condition of the property and how it compares to other homes that are for sale. So therefore, the pre-qualifying process is vitally important to the entire process. If you're not willing to pre-qualify, and I talk about this all the time, if you're not willing to pre-qualify 100% of your sellers by asking every pre-qualifying question, listening carefully to the answer, you're doing a tremendous disservice to the seller. Pre-qualifying is the answer to 90% of the problems that we deal with. The better we are at pre-qualifying, the better we are at getting a listing sold. Why? Because we understand what their motivation is. Now, on a scale from 1 to 10, if the motivation is a 3, it's going to be overpriced. Okay? And do you even want it? If the motivation's an 8, it's going to be more reasonably priced. They're going to be more open to listen to what you have to say. Motivation of the seller determines how much they're willing to listen to the advice you give. So therefore, I have to pre-qualify 100% to get it priced right, to get it sold. And as I'm going to say to you in the next couple of weeks, after 30, 60 days, if it hasn't sold, go back and pre-qualify them again to make sure they really do have the desire to sell. The longer it's on the market, the more their desire to getting it sold could diminish. Third thought I want to share with you. One of the probably most successful leaders in American business, according to the experts, is Jack Welsh, chairman of GE Corporation for many, many years, probably 25 years. I read every book I could find on Jack Welsh. I studied his management philosophy, his thoughts, because I quite honestly believe the guy is a genius. Well, he had, 275 individual corporations within the GE umbrella. And he had a policy that every corporation that he was in charge of, and it could be the refrigerator division, the train division, the airplane engine division, I mean, these are big companies. Every company he was in charge of had to be either number 1 or number 2 in the market they were dealing in. And if they couldn't, and he couldn't help them become number 1 or number 2, he either got rid of that company completely or changed the leadership. All right, now, listen to this. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, your motivation to sell seems to be quite strong. We need to determine how do we become number 1 or number 2 for sale among your competition when it comes to pricing, because that's how buyers choose a property. Will you consider a price reduction so you're number 1 or number 2 in your home size, your home situation, and getting your property sold? It's pretty hard for a seller to say, I don't want to be number 1 or number 2. I want to be number 863. I want to be number 42. What they're saying with their answer is they're telling you their motivation again. If they say, we don't care if we're number 1 or number 2, well, then what you're saying to me is you don't care if the property sells. Because in essence, if they don't want to be number 1 or number 2, aren't they in essence saying, we don't care if our property sells? I wrote down the next thought, okay? Do you understand what these market statistics mean and how they affect the sale of your property? All right, I'm going to say to a seller after 15 to 20 to 25, 30 days, do you understand what these market stats mean and how they affect the sale of your property? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you see here we took 227 listings last month in our little local market. We had 131 sell, and yours wasn't one of them. And the ones that sold, all sold for any place from fair market value or below. These stats prove that we need to consider lowering the price. Now, remember, in your mind, you know if the motivation is strong enough, they will consider lowering their price. I wrote down next, if you want to get prices reduced and listings sold, work on extraordinary customer service on every listing. By this, I mean strong, weekly, honest, truthful, upfront communication between you and the seller. Okay, now let's look at that. Weekly, W-E-E-K-L-Y, not W-E-A-K-L-Y. Strong, weekly, upfront, honest communication. All right, when I did a webinar a couple weeks ago, Kevin, the host, asked a great question. Kevin said, how far do you go with this in terms of being honest? Well, watch, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we had no showings the past week. That's it. That's my conversation. Now, the reason we had no showings is because the properties that we're selling were all 12 to 15,000 less than yours. Okay? Or we had 6 showings and no offers, which tells us the property's overpriced. It's not complicated. Or we ran this ad and we had this many calls that we've been able to use. We had this many calls on your sign, okay? We've had this feedback from other agents showing your property over the last couple of weeks. I wanted you to be aware of that. The biggest challenge sellers face and the things that drive them crazy is once a property is listed, we often take a mental vacation for 10, 12, 16, 20 days in talking to the seller. The most important communication takes place the day after the listing, within 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, 10 days, to keep them engaged in this process with you, okay? Then I wrote down last thought for today, 30 days into every listing you take. Go back and re-qualify the seller in terms of motivation. If that motivation has dropped or stopped, give the listing back. You know, people get discouraged. I mean, it's very common. People get discouraged 30, 60 days into a listing. They're saying, well, honey, maybe we need to wait until the market gets better. Maybe we should wait till the summer. Maybe we should wait till the fall. Their motivation goes up and down. Okay, it's normal. So we have to engage them in conversations and make sure they still have that desire to sell. Okay, let's take, if in 2019 we have 5 million transactions take place in the U.S., listings sold by our controlled sales, that's a lot of deals that are going to take place. I mean, that's an enormous number of transactions. They're being done by highly skilled agents like yourself, with motivated sellers like the ones you're going to work with, and highly motivated buyers. Those transactions are not being done by properties that are 10, 20, 30% overpriced. They're not being done by agents that don't have the skill to go out and work and communicate with the seller. Work on your skills, work on your price reduction thoughts, be more open and honest with the seller in your presentation. You're going to have the success you want. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks for today.